Hi, and welcome to another episode of Eyes Wide Open. We've been talking about the obligation to yearn for Mashiach. And I want to share a very short and profound thought from last week's Torah portion from Shemot, when God comes to Moses in the burning bush and he tells Moses to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. One of the first questions Moses asks him is, with what merit do the Jewish people have to be taken out of Egypt? And God responds that when you take them out of Egypt, it's not going to stop there. You're not taking them out of Egypt to drop them off in the desert, but you're going to take them to Mount Sinai. They're going to receive the Torah, and then they're going to start worshiping me. And taking at face value, what God is telling Moses is nothing right now. You ask me, with what merit do they have to be taken out of Egypt? Nothing right now. I'm investing in the future. In the future, when you take them out of Egypt, you'll bring them to this mountain, and then they'll receive the Torah, then they'll start worshiping me, and then they'll start deserving the fact that, and retroactively, the fact that I took them out of Egypt. I'm investing in the future. They don't have the merit now. In the future, they will. But the question is, in that case, God didn't really answer Moses' question. Moses was asking, with what merit do they have right now to be taken out of Egypt? And God was responding about the future. That wasn't the question. The question was about the present. And generally speaking, the way it works is if you want to receive something, it's based on merit you have now, not merit you have in the future. So the Rebbe answers this question by pointing to a fascinating story brought down in the commentaries, that when Moses came back to Egypt and he told the Jewish people that God was going to take them out of Egypt, and when that date happened, 50 days later, they would receive the Torah on Mount Sinai and enter into this relationship with God where they would connect with God and worship God and serve God. The Jewish people got very excited, and entirely on their own behalf, they started counting the days when this would happen. And this story is brought in commentaries as what part of the backstory to the custom of Sefirat Omer, to count the days between Pesach, which is when we got out of Egypt, and Shavuot, which is when we received the Torah. And it comes from this initial counting that the Jewish people accepted on their own accord, to count the days between coming out of Egypt, the exodus of Egypt, and receiving the Torah. But here's the interesting detail. When Moses told this to the Jewish people, that when they exited Egypt, then 50 days later they would receive the Torah, they didn't actually know when that was, because they didn't know when they would be leaving Egypt. Moses was just saying that in some point in the future, some undisclosed date, God was going to take them out of Egypt. When that happened, 50 days later, they would receive the Torah. But they didn't know when that date would be. When would they be taken out of Egypt? And as such, their counting didn't have much of an effect. They were counting to receive the Torah 50 days from a date, but they didn't know when that date was. And this actually highlights how excited the Jewish people were to receive the Torah, how excited they were to enter into a relationship with God, not just to leave Egypt, but to receive the Torah, to go to that next stage, that even though they didn't know how long they'd be counting for, they just knew at some point in their history, they would be receiving the Torah. And some point in their future, they'd be entering in a relationship with God. And they had no ability to figure out when that date was. That didn't matter to them. They were so excited about this idea of entering a relationship with God that they started counting now for the date, whenever the date would be. And this was what God was saying to Jewish people. God knew the Jewish people. God knew how excited how the Jewish people would be to enter into a relationship with him, how excited they would be to receive the Torah. And so when Moses came to God and he said, with what merit do the Jewish people have to come out of Egypt? God wasn't saying nothing, but it's got to do with the future. God was saying, I'll tell you the merit. But actually, I'll do you one better. I'll show it to you. Go pass along a message to the Jewish people. Go tell them that when I take them out of Egypt, then 50 days later, they're going to receive the Torah, and see how they will react. See how excited they are to receive the Torah, how excited they are to serve me, that they're going to start counting now, even though they don't know when that'll happen. When that happens, when you see how excited they are, that'll be the answer to your question. That's the merit. Not anything they did. It's the excitement that exile hasn't crushed them, that Egypt hasn't crushed them, that even now, not knowing when it's happening, it's enough for them to hear that at some point they're going to enter into a relationship with God, and they're going to believe it, and they're going to believe it with such intensity, they're going to count down the days without knowing how far they're going to be counting down for. That's how strong the excitement is. Says God, that's their merit. That's what's getting them out of Egypt. And the Rebbe concludes in a similar sense. When we talk about with what merit do we have to come out of this exile, to have Mashiach, one of the ideas brought down in many places is the yearning for Mashiach. One of the blessings in the Amidah, in the daily 18 blessing Amidah we say every single day, is that God should bring Mashiach because we hope for him. And the commentaries explain it, that the fact that you hope for Mashiach is a reason for Mashiach, because when you yearn for Mashiach, you're showing God that exile hasn't crushed me, that however it happens to be that I behave today, and however particularly today goes, I know where my heart is. I know what it's really about. My hope and my excitement remains with God, and it remains Mashiach, and I'm not losing myself in exile.